Hello and welcome to another episode of Backlot 605's Box Office. I'm your host, Brian Mensing, and joining me as always is our resident historian, Derrick Veurink. How you doing this evening?
Pretty good. You, Brian?
I guess I can't complain. Still been kind of a quiet box office, I feel for this week here, just because nothing's really been going on since Spider-Man.
Pretty much. That's still the talk of the town, as we will get to here shortly. So,
Yeah, so probably not a super eventful, but we did talk about movies that were potential to show up in this week's top five here, and we'll kind of see how those kind of all played out. Because joining us here at number one, as not surprise, is Spider-Man in its fourth week. Spider-Man No Way Home comes in at $33.02 million. Again, basically just keeps riding the Spidey train. Nothing that we weren't already kind of expecting, just because there's really nothing a whole lot going on in January.
yeah, I mean, it's it was the biggest, most dominant movie when it came out. People are still playing catch up on it.
Hmm.
We're closing in on $700 million, which far and away still blows away any other movie that we've been able to talk about at the box office since the start of COVID. So it's basically just a waiting game now of two things. One is how long will it stay as part of these top five discussions we're having? Because that's probably going to stay in the top five in some fashion here through February, the
Hmm.
rate things are going. And then the second thing is how high will that total number go? We're currently at around $669 million.
Yep.
That is enough for the number six movie of all time at the U.S. domestic box office. In the past
Hmm.
week, it topped Jurassic World and Titanic on
Yes, I
that
see that.
list. And then coming up here by this time next week, it will have topped Avengers Infinity War, so it'll be at least number five. If it
Hmm.
can clear $700 million, it will have topped Black Panther and will be number four. So, really kind of getting to those lower rungs now. But certainly will be fun to see just how far it gets in the first place.
I know, which is I think honestly at this point right now with just everything going on. I mean, that's super amazing. I mean, it's in terms of domestic box office, it's crushing the competition of movies that were not impacted by theater shutdowns and by the buffering and all that stuff and whatnot, because things are still a little iffy in certain states and stuff like that.
Yep.
The fact that it's about to take on Infinity War at number five with all this that's going on. So I can just about imagine, had there been no global pandemic, what would this have honestly had hit. I mean, it's still mind blowing to me.
Oh, absolutely. The other thing that kind of amuses me is, as we're both big Marvel Cinematic Universe fans, it's
Hmm.
kind of funny that after watching all these many years where it's like, Sony and Marvel fighting over what to do with Spider-Man, from Sony going like, we're going to quickly rush these Andrew Garfield movies into production so we can keep the rights. And then ultimately getting to the negotiation where, yeah, you can use Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War and we'll make these movies together. To now come full throttle to, okay, we're going to include the Sam Raimi movies and the Mark Webb movies in an MCU movie, and it
Yep.
becomes Sony's biggest movie of all time, and almost probably the biggest non-Endgame movie for the MCU, and of course, again, one of the biggest movies of all time. So,
Yeah,
if you
definitely.
give them something that you never would have expected and something that people really want to see, it kind of works out. So,
Yeah.
there you go.
The part that makes me interested about this is, clearly we have seen with Tom Holland and this new version of Spider-Man that, Disney and Sony are playing really, 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 really nice right now,
Yep.
to the point where, because one of the first things I think of is like the Incredible Hulk. You
Yep.
know, Universal still owns the Incredible Hulk in terms of, like, if they're going to make a movie, it's going to be a Universal movie. Only
A
Disney
solo
only.
movie, that is.
Right, right, yeah. If Sony only, or I mean, Disney only basically has the rights to use the character, i.e., like Thor Ragnarok, stuff
Yep.
like, and Avengers and stuff like that. And part of me just kind of wonders, why is Universal just sitting on this? Like, I would think that, especially with the success of what Sony is doing right now, why is Universal not trying to jump on that?
I think it's. I don't necessarily see a standalone Hulk movie coming anytime soon. One is Thor Ragnarok showed very much that Hulk can kind of be the co-lead of a movie, and it works
Hmm.
out fine. I also think that Universal doesn't really want to jinx it because obviously after the Ang Lee mixed reception, the mixed reception to the Incredible Hulk, they may not risk it. And I could also see a situation where Mark Ruffalo doesn't necessarily want to be the lead of an Incredible Hulk movie. I think he's kind of been comfortable being one of the ensemble, as we've seen. So
True.
anything could happen. Don't get me wrong, but and of course we all know Mark Ruffalo is coming back for the She-Hulk series. So again, he's willing to be a deferential player to another big star in the
Definitely.
MCU canon. So
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly, if there's anything that we have at least been able to see from many of Mark Ruffalo's movies, is he's, number one, he's a great actor, period.
yep,
But he definitely works great in an ensemble cast because he knows where to be and how to be what he needs to be in that specific cast. So
exactly.
I can't argue that, but at the same time, too, I would be kind of okay with a Mark Ruffalo led solo, Hulk and whatnot, especially if it was a co-production, because then if you get Feige involved and you do all that, I mean, he clearly has been knowing what he's been doing, so
Yep.
maybe that's part of that semi guidance that they Universal would need. So
We'll
anyway,
see.
we'll see. On next to that here, we have come in at number 2 is Sing 2 at $11.95 million in its third week, totaling $109 million. So I mean, not too bad. I mean, we don't really have anything like we've said the last couple weeks. We don't really have anything else that's kind of in this market, if you will, for kids.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I should call out, the first thing is still kind of at if you compare um, the first thing from 2016 to where Sing 2 is at, the first thing is basically outperforming uh, the sequel twofold because at this point its run was basically at just a little over $200 million. You are absolutely right that there is really nothing in the marketplace for it, and something that's actually just been compounded by the news a few days ago that Disney has taken their latest Pixar movie, Turning Red, and is not going to be releasing it into theaters. It's just going to Disney Plus only. But that was going to be the very next fully animated movie in theaters.
Hmm.
So I won't necessarily say that it clears the runway for Sing 2 because Sing 2 is basically going to be done in theaters by mid March anyway.
Right.
But it does still kind of serve a gap on the animation front because based on my research, the next fully animated movie that is coming out to theaters is the Bob's Burgers movie, which is coming out on Memorial Day weekend. So we're
So
going
we
to the
have,
end of yeah.
I guess, yeah. So we've got a few. We still have a little bit of time before that even happens, and even at that case, it's adult animation. It's not even intended for like the same demographic of what this is for.
Yeah, and even if you get really fuzzy with animation, like if we talk animated hybrid, there's Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which will come out in like early April, right before Easter. But again, a big family movie gap that we're not really going to see being filled for quite some time here. Um, it is also interesting that we did get some news late last week that Universal is pulling the VOD trigger quicker than expected, and debuted on VOD services for the typical $20 rental last Friday, the Friday of this weekend, January 7th. So it is out there now as well. Who knows if that'll put a damper on the box office because again, Sing 2 is still kind of the only family movie material that's out there. We
Right.
kind of saw it, early in the pandemic with movies like Tom and Jerry and Raya and the Last Dragon, where even though they were available to watch at home, there were some parents who were like, well, we're going to go out to these movies anyway. And they still made okay box office. Not huge
Yeah.
box office, but okay box office. The other thing I'll add is Sing 2 is now at a total of 109 million. This is the very first animated movie since the start of the pandemic to make $100 million domestic. Encanto got really close. I think it's at like 92 right now. And then movies like Ryan the Last Dragon and Boss Baby 2, they did around like 55 to 60 million. But this is the biggest animated movie of all, or I shouldn't say of all time, but in the past 2 years. So there is still an audience for animated movies. And if Disney would stop taking their Pixar movies straight to Disney Plus, maybe they could set one of
Right.
these records too. But alas, no.
I know that's the part that I do find intriguing. Like for the sake of the burn off from the Fox acquisition for like the Kingsman and West Side Story stuff like that, Nightmare Alley. To have some of these ones that are underperforming for Disney at the box office and whatnot. You know, Disney typically has pretty good success with animated movies, regardless if they're Pixar or not. Some obviously are better than others, and I agree. I think it's kind of mind blowing that they decided to, pull that and put that straight to Disney Plus in a time when things like Sing 2 are, you know, breaking $100 million. I mean, get it out there, get some money on it before you just put it part of your service.
Yeah, I mean, and turning red look cute. I mean, girl turns into a giant red panda. What's not to love about that?
I know.
Um,
I genuinely think it looks like a good movie, and it's something that I think that would have done well at the theater, or at least moderately well. Something that I think
yeah,
parents would have loved to have taken their kids to go see.
yeah, but we'll never know now. So, oh well.
All right. Going on. That's all right. I'll still watch it anyway. All
Yes.
right. Coming in number three, we've got the 355. One of the movies we did talk about here last week. We're coming in this week here at $4.8 million, with a B plus cinema score. So you did have the opportunity to go check this out in the theater.
Yep.
Give us your like high level. What did you think?
I mean, it's a fine movie. I don't think it deserves to be trashed as much as it seems like it has. It's
Hmm.
perfectly fine. Again, the movie's best asset is its high caliber cast because you've got Jessica Chastain, you've got Lupita Nyong'o, Diane Kruger, Penelope Cruz, all doing fancy spy stuff. And it's just fun to see them working together, because they share a lot of screen time together. So that's pretty cool. It is a little bit of a, we've kind of seen some of this spy stuff before because it's like, got to grab the phone or got to grab the hard drive that everybody's going after.
Yep.
So there's that. I mean, so it's a fine time passer. Um, Ironically, it'll probably be a movie that fares well if you are watching it at home.
Hmm.
And you'll see this takes up a big glob of the screen here, but this is the first Universal movie of 2022. And so this kicks off the new release plan for Universal's movies, which I'll go after here very quickly. So, like many other Universal movies, this will go to VOD after 3 weeks. So on January 28th, you'll be able to do the $20 rental for this movie. Now, where things change is because up until the end of last year, new Universal movies, for the most part, went to HBO Max after 7 or 8 months.
Yep.
But now that deal is finally over. We now have some contract synergy within the Universal Comcast Corporation. And so now Universal's movies are going to go to Peacock. So they will stream on Peacock as early as 45 days after theatrical release. So in the 355's case, we will likely see that streaming on Peacock by the end of February. And
Oh,
then what's going to
nice.
happen is it's going to stream on Peacock for 4 months. Then it's going to go to Amazon Prime Video. It's going to stream there for 10 months. And then it's going to go back to Peacock for another 4 months of streaming. So that's roughly gets us to nearly basically the first 2 years of where this movie will be available from a digital and streaming perspective. A little bit confusing, but again, we're going to see a lot of this kick into play here with the studios as they kind of implement their 45-day streaming plans. Warner's going to do the exact same thing with HBO Max. So it'll be interesting to see, how these movies fare, where they become much more, where they'll still have a theatrical window, but
Hmm.
that they'll also still be very much a streaming asset within short order as well.
Yeah. What I find fascinating about that, and I know we've talked about it before, is those studios that don't have their respective streaming services to lean on
Yep. Yep.
for like this, because I mean Sony doesn't have that. I mean, clearly, I mean they could put it on Crackle and go for that ad revenue, but we
But,
know
but
they're
but
not
here's
going
the
to do that.
deal. So Sony doesn't own Crackle anymore.
Oh,
Do you know who owns Crackle?
I don't, because up until just now I thought Sony still did.
I am not making this up. Crackle is now owned by Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment. Look it up on Crackle's site. You will find that they are the owners of that. Sony got out of the Crackle game several years ago. And I
Oh
know
wow.
we like to joke that, Sony could take some of these COVID pandemic movies and dump them to Crackle, but Sony's not in play on there anymore. So the more you know.
Yeah, I mean that's the part I find interesting. Like some of these bigger studios, like Sony, like Lionsgate and whatnot, they are a little bit at that deficit right now, that they don't have like, the NBC Universal. They've got, Peacock to lean on. Warner has HBO to lean on. Disney obviously has Disney Plus.
And
For
Hulu.
these and Hulu's, yeah. I mean, they have these extra windows of ways to be able to play, to be able to get that money coming into them subscription wise. So it will be kind of interesting to see, like you said, how are these contracts and how these things going to play out for other services, or Prime, Netflix, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I am definitely interested, and I guess in a few weeks here I will see this on Peacock.
Yes, you will.
All right. Coming in at number 4, as I spoke before, The King's Man at $3.27 million. Only taking a 28% drop this week here. Granted, hasn't been pulling in a whole lot of big numbers here, but I mean that's a pretty good, you know, deficit, from previous week.
Yeah, I've kind of been surprised how well this has kind of been holding up, especially over the other competition in that second tier, like The Matrix and American Underdog. One interesting thing I'll call out about this week in particular is, so I follow a number of movie theaters in the area here, especially outside of Sioux Falls. We've got a lot of like medium-sized multiplexes, like 5 to 8 screens only,
Hmm.
and a number of those theaters, like say the West Mall 7 here in Sioux Falls, or the 5 screen Luxury 5 in Mitchell, they actually only opened the Kingsman this past Friday, January 7th,
Okay.
because they only had so many screens. All the other big Christmas movies kind of took priority over this. They're kind of like, well, we got to fit in Spider-Man, of course, and we got to give it multiple screens, and
Yep.
we got to fit in Sing 2 and The Matrix and American Underdog. And before you get through, it's like, oh, we don't have any more space for the Kingsman. But once you get past the holidays and can start freeing up some of those screens, they needed stuff to fill it up again. And so I think that's probably where we're seeing a little bit of this excellent hold for the Kingsman, is it's opening in a lot of theaters that didn't actually have it when it opened right before Christmas. So that probably helps it a little bit. Now, to your point, this movie still isn't making the big bucks like a Kingsman franchise movie should, because we're only at 25 million. Typically, these Kingsman movies have gotten to 100 or
Mm.
more, and the
Right.
Kingsman is not going to get there at this rate.
No.
But if it can scoop up, 1 or 2 or 3 million dollars over the course of these next several weeks, it could put together a tidy little sum, especially as we look in January where there isn't much stuff coming out and people might just begrudgingly end up going to the Kingsman anyway because there's not much anything else to see.
Hmm.
So this might be all about the long game, but again, we'll just see how much interest the overall audiences have to get it to that point.
Definitely. And I still stand by and say is it's not a bad movie. It's just a misunderstood movie.
It's a different kind of Kingsman movie. We should put it
Uh-huh.
that way.
Exactly. All right, number 5, as you just said here just a minute ago, American Underdog at $2.41 million, taking a 38% drop. So this is actually probably one of those ones where I guess I kind of was expecting this one maybe to hold a little bit more, but you know,
Maybe, yeah. I kind of thought it would be a little bit too. I mean, obviously from like the Midwestern perspective, I'm sure it's doing very well in theaters yet. Certainly a movie that's only primarily going to appeal to the Midwest area.
hmm
again, it's probably going to benefit in the long run from, you know, the lack of new product out there, and probably more, even more beneficial is it's going to draw an audience that, again, that doesn't really come out to the theater right away. So hopefully they can still come out in the next week or two, and we might get up to like that 25 to 30 million region, which again, for a Christian movie, is actually still pretty darn good. Um, so we'll see how it plays. It probably also doesn't help that it's coming out right at the heat of actual football season as we wrap up the
Right.
regular season, head into the playoffs. People are going to be more focused on the dramatics of real life football as opposed to on the screen. But that's just my thought.
Maybe if that team was hitting the Super Bowl. No, I'm just kidding. You never know.
Yes, yes.
All right, so that is our top five. Coming in at number one, Spider-Man: No Way Home at 33.02 million. Seeing two coming in at 11.95 at number two. The 355 comes in at number three at 4.80. The King's Man at number three,
Whoop,
four.
whoop. I misnumbered these. My fault.
That's all right. That's all right. It still comes in at number four, at
Yes,
3.27. And then American Underdog comes in at number five at $2.41 million. Hey, you know what? Things happen. All right. So, that being, we have a couple of new releases for next week here. One I'm looking absolutely forward to, which is Scream. We
yep,
get to fight. We finally get to see the revival of the Scream franchise, returning cast, from all of them. And because I say that because Marley Shelton, returning from Scream 4.
that's correct.
Um, so again, one I'm definitely looking for. I've always been a fan of that franchise here. Can't wait to see how that turns out. I don't 100% feel comfortable that Scream is going to dethrone Spider-Man, but it possibly could.
I I think it has a chance. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be a neck and neck race because
Hmm.
if No Way Home keeps on the trajectory that it's going, next weekend it would be at about $20 million for the
Right.
weekend. And Scream, I would think it needs to hit at least 20 million, for me to consider it kind of a solid opening given the stature of the franchise and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's going to come down to, we've talked about, the horror faithful, if you've got a big tentpole franchise movie, they will come out for it right away,
Yep.
especially one that's kind of has, like the new Scream installment. It's been, well over a decade since Scream 4 came out in 2011. People are curious, to see Nev Campbell and David Arquette and Courtney Cox back in action. Certainly within the horror fan base contingent, we're very curious to see how the Ready or Not team is going to fare, taking over for Russ Craven and Kevin Williamson in the writing and directing department. So, again, I think as long as people can come out for that right away, Scream has a good shot at doing it. But you're absolutely right. It could actually go either way. The more I'm thinking about it, and especially as we see Spidey hold up better
Yep.
than expected in the past couple weeks, so that'll be fascinating.
It definitely will. I'm curious to see if Ghostface can take on Spider-Man.
Yes.
That being said, what is Belle? Belle, I'm not familiar with.
Yep. So Belle is our first anime release of
Okay.
2022. This is a little social media riff. It's about a shy high school student who moonlights on like a social media site as like this awesome star singer. Um, so it's going to comment on that. It's not from Studio Ghibli, but it's from another studio, the one that made Mirai a few years ago. This is getting a full blown release at the Century 14 here and many other theaters nationwide starting Thursday
Okay.
night, and we'll get a regular run of shows. Not unlike if we talked about My Hero Academia or Demon Slayer the movie, stuff like that. It'll be both in subtitled and dubbed versions. So I think it probably is worth just calling up because, if it does enough business, it might just squeak into that top five.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised for that. And again, we've seen how the big ones like Demon Slayer the movie or the My Hero Academia or Dragon Ball Z movies can do. This one was
Very
a little
well.
bit more of a risk, but it is also coming out at a time where the box office is a little bit more um, forgiving and vulnerable to allow movies like this to get into the top 5, especially again if the anime fan base comes out there. So mainly just want to call that out because we could have a surprise in our hands next week. So
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of curious. Yeah, I mean, I myself am not big into the anime subsection of films and whatnot, but I'm always curious to see if there's anything that's going to be out there that's going to some completely, you know, upset the box office for the sake of going, oh well, that happened.
yep.
All right. Well, that has been our box office for this week. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterbox HQ. Be sure to follow us there, all at Backlot 605. In regards to the podcast, you can check us out on Apple, Stitcher, Google, Spotify, Amazon, and of course, our pretty faces here on YouTube. Be sure to also go over to patreon.com/backlot605 and support the channel. We provide extra episodes every single week because we're crazy and we think we need to give you as much content as we possibly can. Um, we just recently discussed
Kung Pao, Enter
Kung
the
Pao
Fist.
Enter the Fist because January is a little light on anniversaries this week, and it was interesting because Sam is I don't know what Sam
Yeah,
hit Sam's
I have not listened to the episode yet, but I have seen Sam's Letterboxd review,
yeah.
and I'm very curious what the Sam Casey dynamic will be on that front. So I'm very much looking forward to it because I enjoyed Kung Pao Enter the Fist back in the day. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very cheesy movie. It's a
It knows what
very
it is.
it is a very in some ways it is sloppily made, in others it's actually kind of amazing what they're doing in that movie. And it's all for the sake of some very goofy, very stupid humor. So I'm definitely on the positive side of that movie, but I can totally understand why others would not see or not get it. So
It's got bullet time in a kung fu movie.
yeah,
And then shortly thereafter, we will also have the anniversary for Free Jack, which I'm currently in the process of watching, paused right now as we speak, because Free Jack is amazing. And then
yeah.
we will also be doing for Scream and for
Hotel Transylvania
Hotel.
4.
Oh yes, Hotel Transylvania 4. What do you got there, Derek?
Um, as I was just filling some holes in my Blu-ray collection, due to the episode, I did purchase Free Jack on Blu-ray. So
Oh, if it weren't for the fact that I already owned it on digital, I would be over here jealous.
yeah, so I splurged on that. So I
Awesome.
have you to thank for that.
You are welcome. I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are. All right. That being said, we will check you out here next week on the Backlot 605 box office.
See you next week.